This video is sponsored by Sandmark. What is up, creators? This is Tom. Welcome back to another video. So before we get into the core sort of main bulk content of this video, talking about long exposure photography on the iPhone, I want to talk to you about a couple of stories, how when things don't go to plan, when projects don't go to plan, sometimes you just got to roll with the punches and find something that works. However, if you want to skip that bit and you do want to go straight to the long exposure section on the photography, you can click this time code and you'll be taken straight to that point in the video. So I had a bunch of plans to produce a short film using only an iPhone 12 Pro Max. I found and reached out to an amazing mountain biker in my local area called Louis, and he was super up for it. Unfortunately, I live in England, and this is what we get during winter. Luckily, Louis was super chill about this, and we're definitely going to shoot something next year. So if you want to see something like that, definitely hit the subscribe button so you won't miss that upload. The problem is though, I couldn't scrap the project entirely because Sandmark had already been kind enough to send out a couple of filters for the iPhone to help me sort of get the most out of the camera for the short film shoot. In particular, they sent me a motion filter that will help me better control light for in my photos and video. Basically, all this does is like a variable ND for your iPhone. It limits the amount of light that is allowed to enter the frame. Great for video and also great for long exposure photography. They also sent me an anamorphic lens, which is super cool. So let me know if you want to see some content on that down in the comments. So after racking my brain and lots of scrolling on Instagram, I thought, you know what would be cool? Let's go down to Durdledor. Now Durdledor is an amazing rock formation, this crazy rock formation arch on the south of England. It's about 3.5 hours away from where I live. But, you know, amazing location. I thought it was a great place to put the iPhone through its paces, control the amount of light coming in through the camera using the motion filter, and get some amazing long exposure shots of that rock formation. Unfortunately, after that 6-hour round trip, lots of rain, me and my girlfriend did decide to eventually brave the weather down to the rock formation, but this is the only photograph that I managed to get from the entire trip, and that may well be one of the worst photos I've ever taken. This is wet. No chance of taking photos of this. So like I said, after a sort of 3-4 hour drive back, I've resorted to doing, I guess, more of a normal Tom Rich video here, sort of a long exposure photography tutorial using the iPhone and the Sandmark motion filter. Now, there's a couple of options if you're looking to create long exposure photos on an iPhone. Now, the hardware isn't sort of best suited to doing this. This is why cameras are obviously like the main popular way to create long exposure photographs. And that's because there is a hardware limitation on the sort of shutter speed duration on an iPhone. And for this camera here, I believe the iPhone 12 Pro Max as well, is 1 second, and for older cameras it is I believe 1/3 of a second, or older iPhones, excuse me. There is an alternative option. It's called slow shutter cam, and basically what this does is it essentially takes multiple photos or sort of multiple video frames and then combines them into the same photograph. And in my opinion, that's a little bit of a cheat. You can get some really good results, and it also means that you don't actually have to have something like a motion filter to get this effect. But in my opinion, like I said, I wanted to actually try and get proper long exposure photos on the iPhone. So we're using an app called Halide, and what this does is it actually allows you to change the shutter speed and change the ISO of your camera on the iPhone. And like I said, you can bump up that exposure to a 1 second exposure. So it's not going to be a crazy long exposure photo, but it will allow us to achieve the effect properly in camera, no additional software required. So here is the Halide app. This is an incremental purchase on an iPhone, but you can see that the basically you have the ISO controls here. If you sort of slide this out, you get access to a manual control, and you have ISO along the top, and then you have the shutter speed along the bottom. And you can see that by swiping this all to the way to the left, we actually go down to ISO 21, insanely low, and then we can go right down here to a 1 second exposure. And these are the settings that we're going to be using for all of the photos in this video. So I've shot a couple of situations here. First of all is we did this sort of outside sunset shoot, and there's a lot of movement happening with the sea underneath. So it's always good when you do have this sort of, there's something in the frame that's static like the sky here, and then there's something in the frame that is moving or giving you sort of like a whoosh, and water is always a really popular one. Things like waterfalls look amazing for long exposure photography. And then you obviously will need a tripod, and I've bought this little tripod extension, like iPhone mount. I finally bought an actual proper iPhone mount, and that is, as I say, mounted to the tripod here. You can also see the difference that a motion controller makes here. By actually allowing us to control the amount of light going into the camera, we're actually able to increase or actually make the most of that shutter speed decrease. So by allowing more light into the camera through the shutter speed, we need to decrease the amount of light coming in through the camera through the motion filter. And it does mean you can get actual long exposure photographs like this. And when you compare that to the sort of standard static iPhone shot, you can clearly see that there's a pretty significant difference. And then the next setup that I did was in here, this sort of studio space. I do warn you, these photos do look like they've entirely been taken out of some sort of horrendous college art project. But hey, I'm just sort of using it as a demonstrative example. All right guys, what do we have here? So this is the setup that I'm using for these sort of long exposure demonstrative shots here. I have a couple of lights here. I've got the Yongnuo, I think this is a RGB strip. I then have a newer light up here with just like a blue piece of plastic, see-through plastic taped or like strapped to it at the top. And I have the iPhone with one of the Sandmark motion filters on up here as well. Now, these shots are not going to be the sort of best photos in the world, but what it does do, what it hopefully will do, is give you a really good sort of demonstrative a good demonstration of what is actually possible using this proper technique, proper long exposure technique on an iPhone. Obviously, the hardware isn't sort of best suited to long exposure photography, but using these filters, what it actually allows you to, or what look it's going to allow you to get. And hopefully, like I say, even though these aren't going to be the best photos in the world, they are achieving some type of look that you wouldn't definitely associate with normal iPhone photography, which is quite exciting. You can clearly see the massive difference that the filter actually provides. You can see that here's the amount of light that would be naturally hitting the backdrop, and then you put the filter there, and that controls that light and allows us to get that sort of motion blurry I'm the subject here and my face is completely blurred by that motion. That just wouldn't be achievable without this motion filter. And to be honest guys, that's sort of it. Using a filter like this from Sandmark, you're able to control the amount of light coming in to your camera, both for video and photo, and you're able to achieve a look that isn't naturally able to be achieved using just the iPhone camera. Hopefully you have enjoyed this style of video, a little bit different to how I would normally shoot one of these tutorials. If you did enjoy it, I would love to hear what you think down below in the comments. A massive thank you to Sandmark for sponsoring this video. You can check out their wide range of photography, videography accessories for iPhones down below in the description, and I'll catch you guys next time.